Jung Gi-cheul had seen men beg for their lives. He had watched enemies bleed without blinking. He had ended wars with a single quiet decision. Nothing surprised him anymore. Nothing touched him until the night he saw his own face in a stranger. The ballroom shimmered with quiet wealth. Crystal lights hung from the ceiling like frozen stars. Soft music moved through the air. Powerful men spoke in low voices. Deals were being made without contracts. This was Gi-cheul's world.
In a room
Controlled,
full of power,
silent,
only one man controlled
dangerous.
the silence.
He stood near the center of it all, dressed in a perfectly tailored black suit, his expression unreadable. People greeted him carefully, respectfully, fearfully. No one stayed too long. No one ever did. Then, something shifted. Not loud, not obvious, just wrong. At the far end of the room, near the grand staircase, stood a little girl. She wasn't supposed to stand out. Small, quiet, still, but somehow, she did. Gi-cheul's eyes moved to her without thinking, and in that moment, everything else disappeared. She turned. Time stopped. The glass in his hand went still. The voices around him faded. Even the music seemed to disappear. Because the face looking back at him was his. Not similar, not close, exact. The same eyes, the same calm expression, the same quiet intensity that didn't belong to a child. For the first time in years, Jung Gi-cheul froze. He didn't understand it. He didn't believe in coincidence, and he never ignored a detail. So he moved, slowly, deliberately, like a man approaching something dangerous. The closer he got, the clearer it became. This wasn't imagination. This wasn't confusion. This was real. The little girl didn't run. She didn't look scared. She simply watched him, like she already knew he would come. Gi-cheul stopped in front of her. For a brief second, he said nothing. Then, quietly, almost unconsciously,
You look like
"You
me.
look exactly like
My
me."
mom says I look like someone
The
important.
girl tilted her head slightly.
Where's your mom?
Studying him?
Over there.
Not afraid, just curious.
Mom says I look like someone
My
important.
mom says I look like someone important.
Where's your mom?
She
Over there.
replied softly. Those words hit deeper than they should have. Gi-cheul's jaw tightened slightly. His mind was already moving, calculating, tracing, breaking everything down. But beneath all that control, something unfamiliar was rising. He crouched just enough to meet her eyes. "Where is your mother?" The girl looked past him, toward the crowd. Then back at him. "She's here." "That's not an answer." She gave a small, calm smile, the kind that didn't belong to a child. "You'll find her." Then, before he could say another word, she turned and walked away. Gi-cheul didn't follow immediately. He couldn't. Because something had already settled deep inside him. Heavy, unavoidable. He didn't need proof. He didn't need confirmation. He already knew. That child was his. And someone had taken her away from him. Gi-cheul slowly straightened. The calm mask returned to his face, but his eyes had changed. Colder, sharper, focused. He reached for his phone. One command, low, controlled, absolute. Lock down the exits. A pause. And then, "Find me the woman who brought that child here." The ballroom continued as if nothing had happened. Music played. People laughed. Glasses clinked. But the night had already changed, because somewhere inside that building was a woman who had hidden his child from him. And Jung Gi-cheul was about to find her. No one ignored Jung Gi-cheul's orders, not in his world, not in his presence. Within seconds, the rhythm of the ballroom shifted, invisible to most, but not to him. Security moved quietly. Doors were no longer just doors. They were exits being watched, eyes everywhere. And in the middle of it all, Gi-cheul stood still. Calm on the outside, but inside, everything had changed. He didn't feel anger first. He felt something worse. Certainty. That child was not a coincidence. And if she existed, then the past he had buried was standing somewhere in this building, waiting. His phone buzzed once, a message, short, precise. South Wing, private lounge. He didn't reply. He didn't need to. He moved. Each step was measured, controlled, but faster than usual. People noticed. They always noticed when Jung Gi-cheul moved with purpose. Conversations lowered, eyes followed. But no one stopped him. No one dared to. The music faded slightly as he entered the quieter part of the building, the noise of power replaced by silence. Then he saw her. She stood near the glass wall of a private lounge. City lights stretched behind her like a living painting. She wasn't trying to hide. She wasn't rushing. She wasn't afraid. She was waiting. Aziza. Time didn't stop this time, but something inside him did. She had changed, and yet she hadn't. Her natural curls framed her face effortlessly. Her posture was relaxed, but not weak. Her presence, steady, unshaken. Beautiful, but not in a way that asked for attention, in a way that controlled it. She turned before he spoke, like she had already felt him coming. Their eyes met. No shock, no confusion, just recognition. A long silence stretched between them, heavy, unavoidable. Years passed in that silence, things unsaid, things unfinished. Gi-cheul closed the distance, slowly, deliberately. He stopped in front of her, close enough to feel her presence, far enough to stay in control. But his voice, when he spoke, was different. Lower, tighter. That child is mine. No hesitation, no doubt. The words landed between them like a quiet explosion. Aziza didn't flinch. She held his gaze, steady, unmoved. Then she spoke, calm, controlled. You don't get to say that like it's a discovery. His jaw tightened, just slightly. Why did you hide her from me? There it was, not a question, an accusation. Something darker moved behind his eyes. You had no right. Aziza let out a soft breath. Not fear, not guilt. Something closer to disbelief. Then she stepped closer. Not backing down, not intimidated. You're right, she said quietly. He stilled. For once, you're right. A pause. Then her eyes sharpened. But you also don't get to pretend you don't know why. Silence. The kind that presses against your chest. Gi-cheul's voice dropped even lower, more dangerous. Explain it. Aziza looked at him for a long second, like she was deciding something. Then she said it. You chose your world. Simple, direct, final. And I chose to protect my child from it. The words didn't raise in volume, but they cut deeper than anything louder could. For the first time, something flickered across Gi-cheul's face. Not anger, not control. Something closer to impact. But it disappeared just as quickly. That doesn't give you the right to take her from me. Aziza's expression didn't change. I didn't take her from you. A beat. You lost us. That landed. This time, there was no hiding it. The silence between them turned sharp. Outside, the city lights continued to glow, unaware, unbothered. But inside that room, something had shifted permanently. Because this wasn't just about a child. This was about a past that never ended, a choice that was never forgiven, and a man who had just realized he didn't lose control of a situation. He lost something far more dangerous. Time. And now, he wanted it back. There are moments in life that don't feel real until it's too late. Moments that don't ask for permission. Moments that don't wait for you to be ready. Moments that change everything. But before we continue, welcome to the Mafia's obsession, where power is dangerous, love is never safe, and the choices people make always come with a cost. If you enjoy dark romance, emotional storytelling, and powerful twists inspired by Korean drama and Black drama energy, then you're in the right place. Because in this story, no one walks away unchanged. Jung Gi-cheul had faced many enemies in his life. Men with power, men with money, men who believed they could challenge him. None of them had unsettled him. None of them had ever made him hesitate. But a child had. He stood in the quiet hallway outside the private lounge, his expression calm, but his mind anything but. Aziza's words still echoed in his head. You chose your world. You lost us. He didn't accept that. He couldn't. Because if that were true, then everything he had built, everything he had become, had cost him something he didn't even know he had. And Jung Gi-cheul did not lose things. Not without taking them back. His phone buzzed again. Another message. Child located, East Corridor. His eyes darkened slightly. No hesitation this time. He moved. The hallway stretched long and quiet, far from the noise of the ballroom. Soft lights lined the walls, the kind of place where people passed through, but never stayed. And there, near a tall window overlooking the city, stood the little girl. She was alone again, calm, still, like she belonged to a different world entirely. Gi-cheul slowed as he approached, not because he was unsure, but because something inside him told him this moment mattered. The girl turned before he reached her. Their eyes met again. And just like before, it was the same. That same unsettling reflection. This time, he studied her more carefully, not as a stranger, but as something that belonged to him. Her posture, her eyes, even the way she stood in silence. It wasn't imitation. It was inheritance. You found her? The girl said softly. No fear, no surprise. Gi-cheul stopped in front of her. I wasn't going to stop looking. A small pause. Then he asked, more controlled this time. How old are you? 6. 6. 6 years. 6 years he didn't know. 6 years he didn't see. 6 years that were taken from him. Something dark moved behind his calm expression, but his voice remained steady. What's your name? The girl looked at him for a moment, like she was deciding whether he deserved the answer. Then, Amara? The name settled into him, quiet, heavy. Do you know who I am? He asked. Amara tilted her head slightly. My mom said I would meet you one day. That answer was not normal. It was not random. It was expected. Gi-cheul's eyes sharpened. What exactly did she tell you? Amara looked past him briefly, then back. She said you're someone who doesn't like losing. A pause. And that when you find something important, she held his gaze. You don't let it go. Silence. Gi-cheul didn't react immediately. Because for the first time in years, someone had just described him perfectly. And that someone was his daughter. He crouched slightly, lowering himself to her level. Not out of kindness, not out of softness, but because this mattered. Did she tell you who I am to you? Amara shook her head. No. Another pause. She said you would figure it out yourself. Of course she did. Aziza had always been like that. Careful, strategic, always thinking 3 steps ahead. Gi-cheul exhaled slowly. Everything was becoming clearer now. This wasn't accidental. This wasn't sudden. This was something Aziza had prepared for. And yet, she still kept the truth from him. He studied Amara again, longer this time. There was no doubt left. None. That quiet certainty from earlier had now become something stronger, something final. This child wasn't just his. She carried him. And suddenly, the world felt different. Not weaker, not softer, but more dangerous. Because now, he had something to lose, and that changed everything. Gi-cheul stood slowly, his presence shifting. More focused, more precise, more controlled than before. But underneath that control, something new had formed. Not confusion, not anger. Something deeper. Possession. He looked down at Amara one last time. You shouldn't be walking around alone. Amara gave a small shrug. I wasn't alone. He paused. Then, I was waiting. For me? He asked. She nodded. Simple. Certain. And in that moment, Jung Gi-cheul understood something he had never felt before. This wasn't just a situation to fix. This wasn't just a problem to solve. This was his. And he was not going to lose it. Not again. Some stories don't end. They pause. They wait. They hide in silence until something forces them back into the light. Jung Gi-cheul did not return to the ballroom. He didn't need to. The night had already given him what mattered. Answers, or at least the beginning of them. Amara stood beside him quietly, her small hand resting against the glass as she looked out at the city lights. She didn't ask questions. She didn't seem confused. That, more than anything, unsettled him. Because children asked questions. They were curious, restless. But Amara was calm, observant, measured. Like him. Gi-cheul's gaze shifted slightly, toward the hallway, toward the direction Aziza had gone. She hadn't followed. She hadn't tried to stop him. Why? Which meant one thing. She trusted him just enough. Or she already knew this moment was inevitable. Either way, he was done waiting. Stay here, he said quietly. Amara looked up at him, not scared, not resistant. Just watching. Are you going to argue with her again? She asked. The question was simple, but it landed heavier than expected. Gi-cheul didn't answer immediately. I'm going to finish a conversation we should have had years ago. Amara studied him for a second, then nodded. Okay. No fear, no doubt. Just trust. That, too, felt unfamiliar. Gi-cheul turned and walked. Each step toward Aziza felt different now, not just controlled. Personal. The hallway seemed quieter this time, longer, heavier. And when he reached the private lounge, she was still there. Exactly where he left her. Standing by the glass, city lights behind her, like nothing had changed. But everything had. She didn't turn this time. She didn't need to. I was wondering how long it would take you, she said softly. Gi-cheul stepped inside, closed the distance. You knew I would find her. Aziza exhaled slowly. I knew you would recognize her. A pause. That was always the problem with you. His eyes narrowed slightly. You assume everything is a problem. No, she said quietly. I assume everything has consequences. Silence. The air between them shifted. Not hostile, but charged. Gi-cheul stepped closer. You had 6 years, he said. Low, controlled. 6 years to tell me. Aziza finally turned. And for the first time, there was something in her eyes. Not fear, not regret. Pain. You had 6 years to look for me, she replied. That stopped him. Just slightly. I did, he said. But even as the words left his mouth, they didn't sound as certain as they should have. Aziza noticed. Of course she did. Her voice softened, but only slightly. No, you didn't. A step closer. You moved on, Gi-cheul. She said his name like it still meant something, like it hadn't been buried. You went back to your world. A pause. And I learned something very important. He held her gaze. What? Aziza didn't hesitate. That loving you was dangerous. The words didn't rise. They didn't need to. They settled between them like something permanent. Gi-cheul's expression didn't change, but something inside him tightened. That doesn't justify hiding my child. Aziza's eyes sharpened. I didn't hide her from you. A step closer. Now they stood face to face. I kept her away from the life that almost destroyed me. Silence. That was the truth. Not exaggerated, not emotional. Real. Gi-cheul's voice dropped. You're still standing? Aziza gave a small, almost bitter smile. Standing doesn't mean untouched. That hit. And for the first time, Gi-cheul didn't respond immediately. Because he remembered. Not everything, but enough. The nights, the tension, the threats that followed him everywhere. And her, standing in the middle of it, trying to understand a world that was never meant to be safe. You should have told me, he said finally. Quieter now. Aziza shook her head slowly. And what would you have done? A pause. Protected us? She asked. Her eyes searched his. Or controlled us? That question stayed, because the answer wasn't simple. Gi-cheul didn't deny it, didn't argue, because deep down, he knew. His way of protecting had always come with control. And Aziza had never been the kind of woman who could live like that. I would have made sure you were safe, he said. Aziza's expression softened, but only slightly. That's the problem. A beat. You think safety means owning everything around you? Silence again. The city lights flickered behind them, unaware of the war happening in that room. Gi-cheul looked at her, really looked this time, not just as a woman from his past, but as the mother of his child. And something shifted, not control, not power, something deeper, understanding. But it came too late, because the past didn't disappear, and the damage had already been done. You don't get to decide what happens next, Aziza said quietly. Final. But Gi-cheul didn't step back, didn't break eye contact. No, he said. Low, certain. But I will be part of it. That was not a request. That was a promise. And this time, Aziza didn't respond. Because she knew something he hadn't said out loud yet. He wasn't just asking for answers anymore. He was staying. Some people leave your life and disappear. Others leave, but never really go away. Jung Gi-cheul was that kind of man. The kind you don't forget, not because you want to remember, but because something about him refuses to let go. Aziza had learned that the hard way. She stood by the glass, her reflection faint against the city lights, her expression calm, but her thoughts far from it. He was too close again, too real, too present. And that was dangerous. Because once upon a time, she had gotten too close to him, and it had almost destroyed her. You're thinking about leaving again. His voice cut through her thoughts, low, certain. Aziza didn't turn. You always assume you know what I'm thinking. Gi-cheul stepped closer. I don't assume. A pause. I remember? That word lingered. Because memory was where everything started. And everything ended. Aziza let out a quiet breath. You remember parts, she said. Not everything. That was true. Because what they had was never simple. It didn't begin with love. It began with tension. It was raining the night they met. Not the soft kind of rain, the kind that made the city feel heavier. Aziza had been standing outside a quiet building, her hair damp, her expression annoyed as she tried to call for a ride that wasn't coming. She didn't belong there, Not in that part of the city. Not around men like him. And yet, that's exactly where he found her. Jung Gi-cheul noticed her before she noticed him. Not because she was loud, not because she was trying to be seen, but because she wasn't afraid. Even then, most people avoided eye contact, avoided presence, avoided anything that might connect them to him. Aziza didn't. When their eyes met, she didn't look away. She studied him like she was trying to understand something. That was new. And Gi-cheul didn't ignore new things. "You're in the wrong place," he had said that night. Aziza had tilted her head slightly. "Or maybe you are." That was the moment. The moment something shifted. Because no one spoke to him like that. No one challenged him without fear. But she did. And instead of walking away, he stayed. They spoke longer than expected, about nothing important, and yet everything felt important. She didn't ask about his power, didn't question his world, didn't try to impress him. She treated him like a man, not a reputation. That was rare, dangerously rare. And slowly, without either of them realizing it, it became something more. Not fast, not obvious, but deep. The kind of connection that grows quietly until one day you realize you can't ignore it anymore. Aziza closed her eyes briefly. "That was a long time ago," she said softly. Gi-cheul's voice came from behind her. Closer now. "Not long enough?" She turned this time. Their eyes met again, and the air between them shifted. Not just tension. Something deeper, familiar. "You shouldn't be here," Aziza said. But her voice wasn't as firm as before. "I'm exactly where I need to be." A pause. "With my daughter." The word landed differently this time. Not as an accusation, but as a claim. Aziza's expression hardened slightly. "You don't get to rebuild something you walked away from." Gi-cheul didn't step back, didn't break eye contact. "I didn't walk away. A beat. I was pushed out." That shifted the air. Because that was not something she expected him to say. Aziza studied him carefully now. "Then you should have come back." Simple, direct. Gi-cheul's jaw tightened. "I did." Silence. But this silence was different. Because now there were two versions of the past in the room. And only one of them could be true. Aziza's voice dropped. "You came back too late." That was it. That was the truth neither of them could change. Timing. The one thing even Jung Gi-cheul couldn't control. And for the first time, he didn't argue. Because deep down, he knew. Somewhere along the way, he had lost her. And now, he had to face the reality of what that loss created. A child, a distance, a version of her that no longer belonged to him. But even then, even now, there was something still there. Unfinished, unresolved, and dangerous. Because the more time they spent in the same room, the harder it became to pretend it meant nothing. Gi-cheul stepped closer. Not aggressively, not forcefully, but intentionally. You tried to forget me. Aziza didn't respond. Because there was no point lying. He saw it anyway. And it didn't work. That wasn't a question. That was truth. And this time, Aziza didn't deny it. Because some people don't disappear. They stay. In memory, in silence, in everything you try not to feel again. Some endings don't happen slowly. They don't fade. They don't give warnings. They happen in one night, one decision, one moment that changes everything after it. For Aziza, that night never left her. It didn't matter how much time passed. It didn't matter how far she went. Some memories don't weaken, they sharpen. And Jung Gi-cheul was at the center of it. You want to know why I left? Aziza asked quietly. The question wasn't emotional. It wasn't loud. But it carried weight. Gi-cheul didn't hesitate. Yes. One word, direct. Because for the first time, he wasn't guessing. He wasn't assuming. He wanted the truth. Aziza held his gaze for a long second. Then she spoke. It wasn't because I stopped loving you. That landed first. Because that mattered. More than anything else she could have said. Gi-cheul didn't move, didn't react. But something inside him shifted. Then why? He asked. His voice was lower now, less controlled. Aziza looked away briefly. Like she had to step into the memory before she could speak it. Then, that night had been quiet, too quiet. Aziza remembered the feeling before anything even happened. The silence, the tension, the way the air felt heavier than usual. She had been inside his apartment, waiting. He was late. Not unusual. But something about that night felt wrong. And then the door opened. Gi-cheul walked in. Not calm, not controlled. Different. His expression was darker, his movements sharper. And behind him came men. Not his usual men. These ones were aggressive, unfamiliar, dangerous. Aziza stood up immediately. What's going on? She asked. Gi-cheul didn't answer right away. He walked past her, removed his jacket slowly, like he was trying to stay calm, but failing. Go to the room, he said. That was the first sign. Because he never spoke to her like that. I'm not going anywhere until you tell me what's happening. That was the second mistake. Because in his world, timing mattered. And that was the wrong time to question him. The men behind him shifted, watching, waiting. Gi-cheul turned. And for a brief moment, their eyes met. Not as lovers, but as two people standing on opposite sides of something dangerous. I said, go inside. This time, his voice wasn't soft. It wasn't controlled. It was sharp. Commanding. Aziza froze. Not because she was afraid of him, but because she had never seen him like that. Not with her. The man who spoke to her gently. The man who listened. The man who chose his words carefully was gone. And in his place was the Mafia boss, Cold, untouchable. She stepped back slowly, but not toward the room, toward the door. And that's when everything changed. One of the men moved, fast, too fast, grabbing her wrist. Hard. Aziza gasped. Don't touch me. Enough. Gi-cheul's voice cut through the room. Sharp, final. The man released her immediately. But the damage was done. Not physical. Something deeper. Aziza looked at Gi-cheul, waiting for him to say something, to fix it, to choose her. But he didn't. Instead, he turned to the men. Handle it. That was it. That was the moment. Not the grab, not the tension. That. Because in that moment, he didn't choose her. He chose his world. Aziza's voice returned to the present, quiet, steady. That was the night I understood something. Gi-cheul didn't interrupt, didn't move. Your world will always come first. A pause. No matter what you feel. Silence filled the room. Heavy. Because there was no easy answer to that. No simple defense. Gi-cheul finally spoke. They were a threat. Aziza nodded slightly. I know. Another pause. That's not the point. Her eyes met his again. The point is, I was there too. That landed deeper than anything else. You didn't protect me, she continued. You controlled the situation. A beat. And I realized I would always come second. Silence. Gi-cheul's expression didn't change, but something inside him shifted. Because she wasn't wrong. Not entirely. In his world, control was survival. And survival always came first. You left without telling me, he said. Not defensive, just stating it. Aziza's voice softened slightly. I left before I lost myself. That was the truth. The real truth. And this time, Gi-cheul didn't argue. Because now, he understood. Not fully, not completely, but enough. And for the first time since seeing that child, he realized something else. This wasn't just about what she took from him. It was about what he failed to protect. Some decisions can be fixed. Some mistakes can be corrected. But some, once made, change everything that comes after. Jung Gi-cheul had made many decisions in his life. Cold ones, calculated ones, necessary ones. He never regretted them. Until now. The room had gone quiet again. Not peaceful. Not calm. Heavy. Aziza's words still lingered between them. Not loud, but impossible to ignore. You chose your world. She wasn't wrong. And that was the problem. Gi-cheul stood there, his expression unreadable, but his thoughts moving faster than ever. For the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about power or control or consequences. He was thinking about time. 6 years. 6 years of a child growing, learning, becoming someone without him. That was something he couldn't calculate, couldn't undo, couldn't control. And that unsettled him more than anything else. Aziza watched him carefully, not expecting an apology, not waiting for emotion, because that wasn't who he was. And she had already learned that lesson. "You should go," she said quietly. Simple, direct. A boundary. Gi-cheul didn't move. "I'm not leaving." No hesitation. No softness. Just truth. Aziza exhaled slowly. "That's not your decision to make. It is now." Their eyes locked again, and this time there was no space left between past and present. Only conflict. "You don't get to walk back into our lives like nothing happened," she said. Gi-cheul stepped closer. "I'm not walking back." A pause. "I'm staying." That word carried weight. Final. Aziza's expression tightened slightly. "You think this is something you can take control of?" "I think this is something I should have never lost." That hit differently, because this time there was no arrogance in his voice, just certainty. And something else. Something new. Responsibility. Aziza saw it. And that made it worse, because it would have been easier if he stayed the same. Cold, untouchable, predictable. But this version of him was harder to fight. "You don't understand what you're asking for," she said quietly. Gi-cheul didn't look away. "I understand enough." "No," Aziza said, her voice firm now. "You understand control." A step closer. "You don't understand what it means to be part of someone's life without trying to own it." Silence. That truth stayed in the air, because it was real. And Gi-cheul didn't deny it. But he didn't step back either. "Then I'll learn." That was new. Not dominance, not command. A statement, and Aziza felt it. Because Jung Gi-cheul didn't say things lightly. If he said it, he meant it. And that was what made him dangerous. Not just to enemies, but to her. Because part of her remembered how easily she had believed him before. "You don't get to learn with her," Aziza said. Protective now, sharp. "She's not your second chance." Gi-cheul's eyes darkened slightly. "She's not a mistake either." A pause. "She's mine." That word again. Possessive, heavy, unavoidable. Aziza's jaw tightened. "She's not something you claim. She's not something you hide." The tension snapped. Sharp. Real. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Because both of them were right. And both of them were wrong. Then, a soft voice broke the silence. "Are you done arguing?" They both turned. Amara stood at the entrance, watching, calm, like she had been listening longer than she should have. Neither of them moved immediately, because something about that moment felt different, important. Amara stepped inside slowly, looking between them. "You both sound like you already know each other," she said. Simple. But it landed. Gi-cheul looked at her, really looked. And something shifted again. Not power, not control. Something deeper, protective, unfamiliar, but undeniable. Aziza moved slightly toward her. Instinct. But Amara didn't hide behind her. She stayed where she was, looking at both of them. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked. The question was soft, but it hit harder than anything before it. Aziza froze. Gi-cheul didn't answer. Because neither of them had expected this moment to come so soon. And suddenly, this wasn't just about the past anymore. It was about now. About what came next. And for the first time, they weren't the only ones involved. Some truths are hidden to protect. Some are hidden to survive. But the longer they stay buried, the more damage they cause when they finally surface. The room felt different now. Smaller. Tighter. Because this time, it wasn't just two people standing in silence. It was three, and the one asking the question deserved an answer. "Why didn't you tell me?" Amara's voice was soft, not demanding, not emotional, but steady. And that made it harder. Aziza didn't speak immediately, because no answer felt right. No explanation felt enough. Gi-cheul watched quietly, not stepping in, not interrupting. For the first time, he understood something important. This wasn't his moment to control. This was hers. Aziza slowly stepped closer to Amara. Her voice, when she finally spoke, was calm, but careful. "There are things I wanted to explain when you were older." Amara tilted her head slightly. "I'm 6, she said. A pause. "I'm not a baby." That almost made Aziza smile. Almost. "I know," she replied softly. "But some things are complicated." Amara looked between them again. Then at Gi-cheul. "He looks like me," she said simply. Silence. That truth didn't need explanation. It was obvious. But saying it out loud made it real. Aziza's hand tightened slightly at her side. "Yes," she said. "He does." Amara studied her carefully, then asked the question neither of them were ready for. "Is he my dad?" The word hung in the air. Heavy, unavoidable. Gi-cheul didn't look away, didn't hesitate. "Yes." The answer came before Aziza could speak. Clear, direct, final. Aziza turned to him sharply, but it was too late. The truth was already out. Amara blinked once. Processing. Not shocked, not confused. Just thinking. "Okay," she said quietly. That response, unexpected. Aziza frowned slightly. "Okay?" she repeated. Amara nodded. "You said I would meet him one day." That landed. Aziza's expression shifted. Because she had said that. Not as a plan, not as a promise, but as something she couldn't avoid forever. And now, that day had come. Amara looked at Gi-cheul again. "You don't smile," she observed. A pause. "Is that normal?" For a brief second, something almost changed in his expression. "Almost. Yes," he said. "It is." Amara considered that, then nodded. "Okay." Simple. Too simple. Aziza stepped in gently now. "This isn't something we rush," she said. Looking at Gi-cheul. We need to take this slowly. He didn't agree. He didn't disagree. He simply looked at Amara, and something inside him settled. Not confusion, not doubt. Something stronger. Connection. She didn't feel like a stranger. She didn't feel new. She felt familiar. Like something that had always been his, but had been kept out of reach. And now, she was standing right in front of him. Gi-cheul crouched slightly again. Not out of habit, not out of softness, but because he wanted to understand. "What did your mother tell you about me?" he asked. Amara thought for a moment, then answered, "She said you're not a bad person." A pause. "But you make dangerous choices." That hit. Not like an accusation, like truth. And Gi-cheul didn't deny it. Because for the first time, he wasn't thinking about defending himself. He was thinking about what that meant to her, to his daughter. "I'm working on that," he said. Quiet. Honest. Amara studied him again. "Nah," then asked, "Are you going to leave again?" The question cut deeper than anything before it. Because this time, it wasn't about the past. It was about now. About what he would do next. Aziza tensed slightly, waiting. Because this answer mattered. Gi-cheul didn't hesitate. "No." One word, but it carried something new. Commitment. Amara nodded. "Okay." Again, simple, like she had accepted something important. But Aziza hadn't, because she knew something they didn't. This wasn't just emotional. This wasn't just personal. This was dangerous. Because Jung Gi-cheul's world didn't allow peaceful endings. And now, he wasn't standing alone in it anymore. There are two kinds of danger. The kind you can see, and the kind that watches quietly. Jung Gi-cheul had spent his entire life controlling both. But control only works when you're alone. And he wasn't alone anymore. The moment he stepped out of that room, everything changed. Not just for him. For them. The hallway felt colder now. Not physically, but instinctively. Gi-cheul walked ahead, his pace steady, his eyes scanning everything without appearing to. Aziza walked beside Amara, closer than before, more aware. She had seen this shift before. That subtle change in his posture, that quiet alertness, that invisible tension in the air. It meant one thing. His world was close. Too close. "Something's wrong," Aziza said quietly. Not a question. Gi-cheul didn't look at her. "Stay close to me." That was all he said. And that was enough. Because he didn't give instructions without reason. Amara looked up at him. "Are we in trouble?" Gi-cheul's gaze softened, just slightly. "No?" A pause. "But we're leaving." That wasn't a suggestion. That was a decision. They turned the corner, and that's when he saw them. 3 men, standing too still, watching too carefully. Not guests, not staff. Wrong. Gi-cheul slowed. Aziza noticed immediately. Her body tensed. "What is it?" He didn't answer. He didn't need to, because the men had already started moving. Not fast, not aggressive, but deliberate, closing distance. Gi-cheul stepped slightly in front of them. Instinct, protective. Aziza's heart skipped. Because that movement was familiar, and it meant exactly what she feared. This wasn't over. It never was. One of the men spoke. "Boss wants a word." Calm, but wrong. Gi-cheul's expression didn't change. "I'm not available." A beat. "You are now." That was the mistake. Because Jung Gi-cheul didn't repeat himself. The air shifted instantly. Cold, sharp, dangerous. "Take them to the car," he said quietly. Not to the men, to Aziza. She didn't argue, didn't hesitate. Because now, this was no longer about pride. This was about survival. She took Amara's hand immediately. "Come." But Amara didn't move right away. She looked at Gi-cheul. "Are you coming?" The question was soft, but it hit harder than anything else. Gi-cheul crouched slightly, just for a second. "I'll be right behind you." That was enough. Amara nodded. "And this time," she followed. Aziza didn't look back. She couldn't, because she already knew what would happen next. The moment they turned the corner, the tension snapped. The men moved. Fast. But Gi-cheul was faster. Precise. Controlled. Efficient. No wasted movement. No hesitation. Within seconds, the hallway fell silent again. But this silence was different, because it carried consequence. Gi-cheul adjusted his sleeve calmly, like nothing had happened. But his eyes were darker now, more focused, because this wasn't random, and he knew exactly what it meant. Someone had been watching, and now they knew about the child, about Aziza, about everything. He turned and walked, faster now, because this time it wasn't just his life at risk. It was theirs. And that changed the rules. There is a difference between power and responsibility. Jung Gi-cheul had always chosen power. It was clean, predictable, controlled. Responsibility was something else entirely. Because responsibility meant you could lose something. And now, he finally had something to lose. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime. Gi-cheul stepped out first, his eyes scanning, his posture sharp. Aziza and Amara followed closely behind. Too close. Aziza hated that. Not the proximity. The reason for it. "This is exactly why I left," she said quietly. Her voice was controlled, but there was tension underneath. Gi-cheul didn't slow down. "This is exactly why you shouldn't have." That answer came fast, too fast. Aziza stopped walking. "No," she said, firm now. "This is exactly why I had to." That made him stop. He turned. And for a moment, they stood there again. Not as strangers, not as lovers, but as two people standing in the middle of a problem that had no easy solution. "You saw what just happened," she continued. "This is your world. A pause. And now she's in it. Amara looked between them quietly, listening, watching. Gi-cheul stepped closer. "She's not in it," he said. "She's with me." Aziza's expression hardened. "That's the same thing." Silence. Because this time, he didn't have a quick answer. Not a perfect one. Because for the first time, she was right in a way that mattered. "You think being near you makes her safe," Aziza said. "But it's the opposite." A step closer. "Being near you is what makes her a target." That word, target, shifted everything. Gi-cheul's jaw tightened slightly. "I won't let anything happen to her." Aziza shook her head. "That's what you said before." That landed hard. Because now, they weren't just arguing. They were standing inside a memory. And that memory had already proven something. Promises didn't always protect people. Gi-cheul's voice dropped. "I'm not making the same mistake twice." That wasn't emotion. That was decision. Aziza studied him carefully. Because this version of him was different. More focused, more aware, but still dangerous. "You don't get to fix the past by controlling the present," she said. "I'm not controlling anything. You already are." Their voices didn't rise. They didn't need to. Because the tension between them was already loud enough. Then, a small voice interrupted again. "I'm okay." Both of them turned. Amara stood there, calm, looking at both of them. "You don't have to argue," she said softly. A pause. I'm not scared." That changed something. Because children weren't supposed to say that. Not in situations like this. Aziza stepped toward her immediately. "You don't have to be brave all the time." Amara tilted her head. "I'm not being brave." She looked at Gi-cheul. "I just feel safe." Silence. Heavy. Because that wasn't something either of them expected. Gi-cheul didn't move, didn't speak. But something inside him shifted again. Not power, not control. Something deeper. A line. A boundary. Something he had never needed before. But now, he did. He looked at Aziza. "This ends tonight." His voice was calm, but final. "No more threats." A pause. "No more risks." Aziza frowned slightly. "You don't decide that." "I already did." That tone again. The one that meant this wasn't negotiation. This was action. "What does that even mean?" she asked. Gi-cheul stepped closer. "It means anyone who comes near you." A pause. "Won't get the chance to try again." That wasn't a threat. That was a promise. And Aziza knew it. That's what scared her. Not the danger, but how far he was willing to go. Because once Jung Gi-cheul decided something, he didn't stop halfway. And now, he had decided something new. Not power, not control. Protection. At any cost, wars don't always begin with bullets. Sometimes, they begin with information. And someone knowing something they shouldn't. Jung Gi-cheul stepped out into the night air. The city of Seoul stretched endlessly around them, bright, alive, unaware. But beneath that calm, something had already shifted. His car waited at the entrance, engine running, doors open. His men were already in position, watching, listening, prepared. Because they knew something had changed. And when something changed around Jung Gi-cheul, it usually meant trouble. Aziza hesitated for a second before stepping forward. She wasn't afraid of him, but she didn't trust what followed him. And tonight, she had seen it again. "Get in," he said. Not harsh, not soft. Just certain. She looked at him. "We're not going to your place." That was clear, immediate. Gi-cheul didn't argue. "We're going somewhere safer." Aziza almost laughed. "There is no such thing in your world." That was true. But he didn't say it. Because this wasn't about truth. This was about control. And for the first time, he wasn't trying to control everything. He was trying to contain it. "Tonight there is," he said. A pause. "Get in." Amara looked between them, then climbed into the car first. Decision made. Aziza followed, reluctantly. Gi-cheul stepped in last. The door closed. And the car moved, smooth, silent. But inside, nothing was calm. Gi-cheul's phone buzzed. He answered immediately. "Yes." A voice came through, low, urgent. Those men weren't random. Of course they weren't. Who sent them? A pause. Then, Park Min-jae. Silence. Heavy. Because that name meant something. Something dangerous. Aziza noticed the shift instantly. "What is it?" she asked. Gi-cheul didn't answer right away. Because now, this wasn't just about the past. This was about the present and the future. "Someone I don't tolerate," he said finally. That wasn't enough. Aziza's eyes narrowed slightly. "Then why is he still around?" That question was sharp. Because in Gi-cheul's world, problems didn't last. Unless they were complicated. "Because he stays where I can't reach him easily," Gi-cheul replied. A pause. "And now, he's reaching for me." That changed everything. Because this wasn't random. This wasn't coincidence. This was intentional. Aziza leaned back slightly. "That wasn't about you," she said. Quiet. "It was about us." Gi-cheul didn't deny it, because he had already reached that conclusion. Faster than anyone else. "They know," he said. Simple, clear, final. Aziza's stomach tightened, because that was exactly what she had tried to avoid. For 6 years. "They shouldn't even know I exist," she said. "They didn't." A pause. "Until tonight." That landed, because it meant one thing. The moment Gi-cheul saw that child, everything changed, not just emotionally. Strategically. Now, he had a weakness. A visible one. And in his world, that was dangerous. Amara looked up at him. "Is someone trying to hurt us?" The question was simple. Too simple. Gi-cheul looked at her. No. A pause. But they're thinking about it. That was the truth. And he didn't lie. Aziza closed her eyes briefly. This is exactly what I was trying to avoid. Her voice was quiet, but strained. I stayed away for a reason. Gi-cheul turned his head slightly. And now you're here. A beat. With me. Aziza looked at him. That's not comforting. He didn't respond. Because comfort wasn't something he offered. Security was. Control was. And now, war. Because Park Min-jae had made a move. A small one, but enough. And Jung Gi-cheul didn't ignore moves. He ended them before they became problems. But this time, it wasn't just about him. This time, there were consequences, real ones. Because if he acted the way he always did, people wouldn't just get hurt. They would be dragged into it. Aziza, Amara, his family. And for the first time, Jung Gi-cheul hesitated. Not out of fear, but because this war wasn't one he could fight the usual way. Power is easy when you don't care who it hurts. Control is simple when nothing matters more than the outcome. But the moment something becomes important, everything changes. Jung Gi-cheul had built his life on one rule: win, no matter the cost. But now, there was a cost he could see. And that made things different. The car moved through the city in silence. Not peaceful silence, not calm. Heavy. Because every person inside it was thinking the same thing. This wasn't over. It had just begun. Gi-cheul's phone buzzed again. He didn't look at it immediately, because he already knew what it would say. More information, more movement, more signs that Park Min-jae had started something. And in his world, things didn't stop once they started. Aziza watched him carefully. She had seen this version of him before. Quiet, focused, already planning 10 steps ahead. And that was exactly what worried her. What are you going to do? She asked. No softness, no hesitation. Just truth. Gi-cheul didn't answer right away. Because for the first time, the answer wasn't simple. The old answer was easy. Eliminate the threat, remove the problem, end it before it grows. That was who he was. But that version of him was the reason she left. And now, he had to decide. Stay the same, or become something else. His eyes shifted slightly, toward Amara. She was quiet, watching the city lights pass by, unaware of how much had already changed, unaware of what could happen next. And that was what mattered. Gi-cheul finally spoke. I'm going to end it. Aziza's expression tightened instantly. Of course you are. There was no surprise in her voice. Only frustration. Listen to me, she said, leaning slightly forward. You don't solve everything the same way. Gi-cheul turned to her. That's the only way problems like this get solved. No, Aziza said, her voice firm now. That's the only way problems like this keep coming back. Silence. Because that was not something he had considered. Not like this. You think removing one person changes everything? She continued. But it doesn't. A pause. It just creates space for another one. Gi-cheul's jaw tightened slightly. That's how my world works. Aziza didn't look away. Then maybe your world is the problem. That landed. Not loudly, but deeply. Because for the first time, she wasn't just challenging his actions. She was challenging everything he had built. And that was not something anyone did. Not without consequences. But Gi-cheul didn't react the way he used to. He didn't shut her down, didn't dismiss her. Because now, her words carried weight. Because now, they affected more than just him. They came for us, he said. Low, controlled. That changes things. Aziza nodded slightly. I know. A pause. That's why you need to think differently. Gi-cheul looked at her. And if thinking differently gets them hurt? That question was real. Because hesitation was not something he could afford. Aziza didn't hesitate. And if doing things your way gets them killed? Silence. That was the line. The one neither of them could ignore. The one that changed everything. Gi-cheul leaned back slightly. For the first time since this started, he wasn't certain. Not about what to do, but about how to do it. And that was new. Amara's voice broke the silence. You're both thinking too much. They turned. She looked at them calmly. If someone is dangerous, a pause. Then just don't let them get close. Simple. Too simple. And yet, it made sense. Gi-cheul studied her. Then looked back at Aziza. Then, for the first time, he made a decision that didn't feel like his old self. We move them, he said. Aziza frowned slightly. What? We relocate. Clear, direct. New place, no connections, no exposure. A pause. They disappear. Aziza's eyes narrowed. That sounds like control again. Gi-cheul shook his head slightly. No, a beat. That sounds like protection. Silence. Because this time, it wasn't about owning. It was about shielding. And that was different. But still dangerous. Because even protection, in his world, came with a cost. Aziza studied him carefully. You're asking us to trust you. Gi-cheul didn't look away. I'm asking you to stay alive. That was the truth. And this time, she felt it. Not power, not dominance. Something else. Responsibility. But trusting him again wasn't simple. Because once, she already had. And it had changed everything. Now, she had to decide. Run again, or stay and face what was coming. And this time, she wasn't the only one involved. Some places are built to be seen. Others are built to disappear. Jung Gi-cheul owned both. But there was only one place he trusted when things became personal. The car left the city slowly. The lights of Seoul faded behind them, replaced by silence, distance, dark roads that didn't appear on most maps. Aziza noticed. "This isn't a hotel," she said quietly. Gi-cheul didn't look at her. "No." A pause. "It's better." That didn't comfort her. Because in his world, better usually meant more hidden, more controlled, more isolated. Amara leaned slightly toward the window. "Where are we going?" Gi-cheul's voice softened, just slightly. "Somewhere no one can find you." Amara thought about that, then nodded. "Okay." That simple trust still felt unfamiliar. The road narrowed. Trees grew thicker around them. The city completely gone now. And then they arrived. A large, modern estate sat quietly behind tall gates. Not flashy, not loud, but strong. Built like a place that didn't expect visitors. The gates opened without a sound. The car drove in. Aziza's eyes moved carefully across everything. Security cameras, hidden movement, controlled environment. She recognized it instantly. "This is one of your places." Gi-cheul stepped out first. "Yes." That was all he said. Because nothing else needed to be explained. This was his world. And now they were inside it. Amara stepped out next, looking around. "It's quiet." Gi-cheul nodded slightly. "That's the point." Aziza stepped out last, still tense, still unsure. Because quiet didn't mean safe. Not with him. But for now, she followed. Inside, the house was exactly what she expected. Clean, minimal, controlled. Nothing unnecessary, nothing personal. Until now. Because suddenly, it didn't feel empty. It felt occupied. Gi-cheul watched as Amara walked further inside, curious, exploring. Not afraid. That mattered. "You can take the room on the left," he said to Aziza. She didn't move. "We're not staying long," she replied. Gi-cheul looked at her. "You are." That tone again. Not forceful, but final. Aziza exhaled slowly. "This is temporary." He didn't argue. Because right now, temporary was enough. Amara turned back toward them. "Is this your house?" Gi-cheul nodded. "One of them." She smiled slightly. "You have a lot of houses?" "Yes." A pause. "But none of them matter." Aziza looked at him briefly. Because that was new. Amara tilted her head. "Why not?" Gi-cheul didn't answer immediately. Then, "Because they're empty." Silence. And for the first time, that house didn't feel like just a place. It felt like something that had been missing something. Until now. Amara walked further in. "This one isn't empty anymore," she said. Simple, but it changed the air. Aziza looked away briefly. Because that kind of statement was dangerous. Not physically, emotionally. Gi-cheul watched her. And something inside him shifted again. Not control, not power. Something quieter. Something unfamiliar. He turned slightly. Food will be brought in. Practical. Back to structure. Back to control. But not completely. Because this time, there was something else underneath. Care, Aziza noticed. And that made it worse. Because it would have been easier if he stayed the same. But he wasn't, and change was harder to fight. The house settled into silence. But not peaceful silence. The kind that comes before something happens. Because far away, in the city they left behind, someone was already reacting, already moving, already planning. And the place no one could find them wouldn't stay hidden forever.